Hello and welcome to this Affinity Photo tutorial where I'm going to try and recreate a tutorial done by the F6 Academy about the reflective gradient in Photoshop. Now this was only released a few weeks ago, so I do hope that the F6 Academy don't mind me trying to sort of nick the idea, but as Affinity Photo doesn't have a reflected gradient, hopefully that will not clash so much. It's the basic idea behind it that I want to sort of borrow and try and adapt for Affinity Photo. So in the Photoshop tutorial it shows you looking at a wildlife image and a landscape and in a portrait image, but where he is also sort of mucked around with the colours. Now I do advise watching that Photoshop tutorial, and I'll add a link to it in the description for this video. But basically this is, if I turn this off here, this is the start image. All these images came from Pixabay, so this was the start image and this was the end result. And similarly with this one, I wanted to make this area here much warmer and sunnier, so that was the start image and that was the end result. And then with this image I've sort of accentuated the sunshine and glow on the back of the sheep here, so that was the original image, and that is with the sort of copy of the reflected gradient. So let me just delete these. So we start back with the original images. So I'll go back to the sheep image and start with that one. So we're basically just going to add a gradient. Now I could sort of go with the gradient tool and it probably would work okay, but the only problem with just starting straight with the gradient tool is that you sort of can't go back and tinker with it at a later date. It's best to use a new fill layer, and to get the new fill layer you come to the layer menu and the option is here, new fill layer. Now I have already made a shortcut for this for my own use. I don't think there is one by default, so I think the only place you can start a new fill layer is from this menu unless you make a shortcut. So if you click on this, it will start you with a solid colour by default. In this case it's white, so you want to change this to linear and then sort of just draw a gradient across the image. Now I held down the shift key when I did that just to keep that straight, but it is not 100% important because we are going to be moving this about. So up here next to where it says linear, there's a box displaying the current gradient, and if you click on that we can then edit the nodes and the colors. So at the moment the color node that we are going to edit is the largest one, and that is the one on the left. Now before I do that I'm going to click on this insert button to add another node in the middle. So first of all I'm going to come back to this first one on the left and I'm going to drop the opacity down to 0, so there's no white on this side, and then I'm going to come to the node on the right and I'm going to change that colour to white. I'm going to use the HSL wheel and I'm going to lower the opacity of that down to 0, so there is only this colour of sort of grey white in the middle here. So I'll click on that node and we will change the colour of that, and we're going to make this a yellow. Now, depending on the picture you're working on, you can go for sort of a really sort of just yellow, or a slightly green yellow, or a slightly red yellow. As there's a lot of grass here, I'm going to be going for more towards the green spectrum, and I may just sort of lower the brightness or luminosity of that down to about there. I'll then come back to my node on the left and then insert another node there, then highlight the middle node and insert another one to the right of that. It will always insert to the right of the node that is highlighted. So what I'll do now is I will highlight this middle node and I will just increase its luminosity a bit. So we now got a brighter yellow in the middle, tapering off to the slightly lighter yellow. So now that I have that in place, I can now move my gradient around to where I want it. Now, as the sunlight is sort of coming from behind the sheep and sort of on their backs, I want this yellow line to sort of go diagonally across their backs. So I'm just going to find a good position that I think will work. Let's go with there, and about there. Now you can also sort of click and move these nodes to where you think works best, but first, before you sort of really get down to that, first thing we need to do is change the blending mode. At the moment it's currently on normal, and we're going to change this to linear light, and then drop the opacity down quite low, it's about 20% at the moment, and then just increase it to how you might want it to suit your taste. Now obviously I don't want the yellow across the sheep's face, we will come to that in a minute. I'm mainly looking at the background grass area, so that's a bit too bright for the grass, so I'm going to go on about 40%, and you can still tinker with the gradient, the positions of the nodes, and for quickness I'll leave it at that. Obviously you could take more time if you're doing it yourself, you know, on your own pictures you want to be more careful. So now we need to just remove that yellow from the sheep. So for this we're going to use a layer mask, and making sure that this layer with the yellow gradient is highlighted. If I click on the layer mask icon here, it will add a white layer mask to that layer. Now what the white layer mask does, because it is white, I mean layer masks only really work in two colours, white and black. White attached to, be it like this, a gradient layer, fill layer, adjustment layer, live layers. If it is white, it will allow whatever that layer it is attached to see what it has done. So if you paint black on to this layer mask, it will hide whatever the layer it is attached to is trying to show. So what I need to do is get the paintbrush tool, making sure that black is the colour, and I'm going to go for a sort of a middle opacity. I've got 49% here, hardness of 0, and I'm just going to paint over the sheep to take that yellow off of them. And again, I'm not being overly careful or fussy here because I really do not have the time, otherwise this video will go on forever. And hopefully you can see that that is starting to show through. And on this bigger sheep I'll increase the brush size and then reduce it. I'm using the left and right square bracket keys to increase the size or reduce the size of the brush head. So I'll reduce it down for this sheep's ears, and I'm keeping some of that sort of yellow on the backs of the sheep just to help accentuate that sort of summery glow. So if I turn that on and off, that is the effect that we are getting. Now, like I said, I'm not being overly fussy about how well I'm doing this because it is just a quick demonstration, hopefully. So doing the same thing on this lighthouse image, I'll try and be a bit quicker with this one. New fill layer, linear, draw out my gradient and insert a middle color and lower the opacity of the left node, and I'm going to make this white. You could leave it a grey, but I found it worked a bit better if you changed it to white, so both sides are a mirror image, which is what the reflected gradient in Photoshop would do. It would be the same colour on both sides, because it is, although this has been reduced down to 0, it is still gradually going from sort of white down to nothing, rather than one side being going white to nothing and the other one going sort of white to a grey nothing, if you see what I mean. So highlight the middle one, change the colour. Now this time I want a more orangey yellow because this sandy colour is there. I'm going to lower that luminosity, then add insert another node there and insert a node there, and then come back to the middle and just bring that luminosity back up a bit. And now it's just a case of altering the direction of this, and let's change this to linear light now and lower the opacity down to, let's say, 30% roughly, and then it's just a case of getting this in the direction you want it. Now obviously the sun is over here somewhere because you've got these shadows here, and I just want to make that pathway. Oh, what did I do there? Yeah, I want to make the pathway the brighter, more yellow. Again, like before, I can just alter the inner nodes just to get a position that I want. So like before, I'm going to add a layer mask to this because I don't want yellow in the sky. So come to the brush, like before, make sure that black is the colour we're using. The layer mask is the layer that we are on. Now I'm going to increase the opacity of this because I know I definitely don't want any of this yellow up here in the sky, and maybe a bit over this side. Again, I'm not being 100% precise here, so like that, and then I'll reduce the size, and I want to remove any of this yellow from the sort of shadow here. And then also from the shaded area of these rocks. I might lower the opacity down and just take a little bit off of the tops of those rocks, and also on these rocks over here on the right, and maybe a bit of this area here. So it's only really the pavement here that I'm sort of accentuating the sunshine, so I've not done an over fussily job here, but you get the idea that adding that directional sort of reflective gradient, you can add a bit of extra sunshine to an image. So coming on to the image of the woman, now this is going to be slightly different. Again, I'm going to just add a new fill layer. I'm going to change this to linear, and draw out the gradient, and then I'm going to add or insert a new node in the middle, and a bit like before, I'm going to reduce the opacity down to 0 on the left, highlight the right one. I'm going to make that white, and then reduce the opacity on the right, and then come back to the left hand node, insert one in the middle, highlight the middle, and insert another node to the right of that. So much like before, I'm going to select a yellow, and I'm just going to, for this case, I'm going to go more as like the middle of the yellow, so it's not either leaning towards the yellow or towards the green or towards the orange. And I'm just going to put that about there. And now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to change the colours of these other nodes. Now in this picture the light is coming from the right hand side, so I want a sort of lighter blue on the right of this line and a darker blue on the left. So let's start with the left hand one. So we'll change the colour, and we'll go for a blue, I don't know, roughly about there. I'm only really guessing, and then come to the one right of the middle and select a lighter blue, something like that. Then change the layers blend mode to linear light, reduce the opacity down, and I'm going to put it's on about 31% in a moment. And then it's a case of, much like before, tinkering with the gradient, or its position and direction. And like I said, the light is sort of mainly on a hair, so I'm going to move this so it's more on the right of her face. Extend this out a bit, so I've got blue, a lighter blue here, and bring that in a tad like that. Yeah, so what I'm going to do now is add the layer mask, and like before, get the paintbrush, make sure it's on black, and then just paint over the area that you want to remove some of this effect. Let's reduce the opacity down a little bit. Yeah, so I mainly want that sort of yellow on the side of her face, and on the, just a little bit on the, what will happen there? Now I may have gone maybe a bit too much with how much I'm taking off here, but I'm trying to do this quickly. Right, so I don't want so much on her face. I don't mind it on her hair, but just tone it back slightly. So it's not brilliant, it's not perfect, but you're getting the idea that I've got the sort of using a reflective glow gradient idea, in the sense I've got a sort of the bright colour in the middle, and I've altered the colours on this particular picture to a lighter blue on the right and a darker blue on the left, just to sort of give that effect. I hope that sort of all makes sense, and like I said, I do really advise you to have a look at the Photoshop tutorial, just so you understand better what he's trying to say. The f64 Academy is one of my favourite sites to check out, to give me ideas for videos that I can make for Affinity Photo. So please check it out. So thank you for watching, and goodbye.